There is a hidden danger in our desire to belong. The yearning for acceptance, love, and familial connection often blinds us to the boundaries we must set in order to preserve our inner peace and wholeness. The soul is not nourished by loyalty to toxicity, and blood is not a sacred excuse for enduring spiritual harm. The psyche, if repeatedly violated by behaviors that diminish its integrity, will either collapse into silence or erupt into chaos. We must awaken to this truth. There are certain behaviors, no matter who commits them, that should never be tolerated. When someone uses guilt, shame, or fear to control your actions or decisions, the damage is not always visible on the surface, but it carves deep fractures in the psyche. Emotional manipulation is one of the most subtle and insidious forms of psychological invasion because it often masquerades as concern, care, or love. You may hear words like, "I only want what's best for you," or "you'll regret this later." And they appear innocent, even loving, but their true intention is to replace your inner guidance with someone else's agenda. This tactic is often used by those who do not want to face their own insecurities and instead choose to impose control over others, especially those who are empathetic, peace-seeking, or bound by familial or emotional loyalty. When you begin to second-guess your intuition, when you hesitate to speak your truth because someone might twist it into a personal attack, when your no is not accepted unless it aligns with someone's emotional comfort, these are signs that manipulation is at play. The manipulator does not want resolution. They want domination over your emotional world. They want to reshape your truth so that their own ego remains undisturbed, and they often use your compassion as a weapon against you. This becomes particularly difficult when the manipulation comes from a family member, someone you were raised to love, obey, or protect. The conflict within becomes unbearable as part of you wishes to honor the relationship while another part of you screams to break free from its chains. But there can be no true bond without honesty, and no freedom within manipulation. When you tolerate these mind games, you gradually lose your sense of identity because you begin to live according to how someone else wants you to feel, think, and behave. You may find yourself apologizing even when you've done nothing wrong, making decisions that betray your own values, or remaining silent when your voice trembles with truth. You begin to wear a mask in your own life, and that mask becomes so familiar that taking it off feels like rebellion rather than liberation. The manipulator thrives in this confusion. They create storms and then offer to be your shelter, just so you depend on them to feel safe. But this safety is illusion. It is the cage that keeps you from flying. No relationship, no matter how long standing, should hold you hostage in this way. You do not exist to soothe the wounds of others at the cost of your own spirit. Your ability to sense manipulation is not weakness, it is a signal from the deeper self, urging you to reclaim your power. You must recognize these patterns, even if they come from someone you love. Love without freedom is bondage, and connection without respect is corrosion of the soul. To protect your emotional integrity is not an act of selfishness, it is a necessary return to wholeness. The first step toward a life where your feelings, needs, and choices are not just heard but honored, and where the subtle prison of manipulation is replaced by the wide open space of authenticity and inner peace that allows you to breathe again and slowly begin to rebuild the parts of you that had to shrink to survive respect, is not something that should be demanded by authority or assumed through proximity. It is demonstrated through actions that consistently affirm another person's dignity, boundaries, and emotional space. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, whether through condescending words, dismissive gestures, or constant interruptions that silence your voice, it signals a deeper disregard for your existence as a sovereign individual. In families, this disrespect often becomes normalized because of long-standing hierarchies, where elders or dominant personalities believe they are entitled to undermine others without consequence. You may hear things like "you should be grateful," "you're too sensitive," or "you think you know everything now." And though they may seem minor or harmless at first, these words carry the weight of belittlement and erosion. Each time you are dismissed, mocked, or spoken over, it is not merely a disagreement, it is a subtle message that your thoughts do not matter, your feelings are inconvenient, and your personhood is secondary. The soul registers this, even when the conscious mind tries to make excuses. You start minimizing your own needs, shrinking your opinions to avoid confrontation, or laughing along when the joke is on you just to maintain a sense of peace that is actually built on your silence. This is not humility, this is self-erasure dressed in obedience. Repeated disrespect doesn't only harm your confidence, it creates an internal split where one part of you wants to stand up and be seen, while another part trembles with guilt or fear at the thought of being labeled disrespectful yourself. This inner war is exhausting, and it slowly convinces you that conflict avoidance is more important than self-respect. But the cost is heavy because over time, disrespect tolerated becomes an invitation for more. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept, and when you keep showing up with grace to those who meet you with contempt, you are not winning their love, you are sacrificing your worth to preserve their comfort. Especially within families where the bonds run deep, it becomes difficult to draw the line because tradition tells you that love requires endurance, that family must come first, that respect is owed upwards even when it is not given downwards. But this outdated narrative has broken more spirits than it has healed. Respect is mutual, or it is manipulation, and no amount of shared blood should allow someone to dishonor your essence. You have a right to demand basic decency, to expect that your boundaries be honored, your space acknowledged, and your identity affirmed. Choosing to no longer entertain consistent disrespect does not make you disloyal, it makes you awake. It means you have finally realized that love without respect is just obligation with chains, and that to truly be at peace with others, you must first be at peace with yourself, which only happens when you stop confusing patience with tolerance for cruelty and start claiming your space as one who deserves to be treated with the same reverence you so willingly offer others in silence. When someone consistently denies your lived experience, they are not simply disagreeing with you. They are attempting to rewrite your reality and impose their version of truth onto your consciousness in a way that disorients your perception and erodes your trust in your own mind. This form of psychological distortion, often cloaked in casual dismissal or overly rational explanations, chips away at your ability to feel safe within yourself. It sounds like you're imagining things. It wasn't that bad, or you always overreact. And though these words may appear small on the surface, their effect runs deep as they tell you, again and again, that your memory cannot be trusted, your emotions are excessive, and your truth is invalid. Over time, you may begin to question your own instincts, doubt the sharpness of your awareness, or even attempt to suppress the parts of you that know what happened but feel unable to defend it. This is a violation of your inner world, a slow unraveling of the threads that hold your sense of self together. It is especially damaging when it comes from family, because these are the people you are conditioned to trust, to turn to for affirmation and clarity, and when they become the very source of confusion, the betrayal echoes through your body and soul. You begin to wonder if your pain was ever real, if perhaps you were too emotional, if your memories have betrayed you, and in that uncertainty, the denier of your truth gains power. They are no longer just in control of the story, they are in control of your narrative and thus in control of your identity. You may find yourself explaining again and again what hurt you, hoping they will finally understand, but each time you speak and are met with blankness or contradiction, it feels as though your voice becomes less and less relevant. The tragedy is that this often happens under the banner of love or reason, where the person may not scream or rage, but quietly and logically reframe the situation to suit their comfort, leaving you to carry the weight of doubt. This is how emotional and psychological invalidation operates, not through volume, but through erasure, through the cold removal of your inner truth, and the refusal to acknowledge your emotional reality as legitimate. But your soul knows what it lived, your body remembers, your nervous system reacts. No one else walks inside your skin, feels the trembling in your hands, or hears the whispers that echo from your pain. And anyone who seeks to deny that is not seeking to love you, they are seeking to control the version of you that is allowed to exist in their world. To reclaim your reality is to honor your truth without apology, to say no even when it makes you look defiant, and to recognize that you do not need permission to believe what your heart knows, your bones carry, and your dreams try to reconcile each night in silence when someone offers love only when you are agreeable, obedient, or aligned with their expectations. That is not love, but a transaction disguised as affection, and it becomes a dangerous foundation for any relationship because it teaches you that you must constantly perform to be worthy of emotional warmth. This kind of love is conditional and leaves the soul in a state of quiet panic, always wondering what part of itself must be hidden or adjusted to maintain connection. You begin to internalize the idea that your worth is dependent on external approval, that if you dare to express anger, sadness, independence, or divergence, the love will be revoked and replaced with silence, criticism, or emotional distance. This is particularly damaging in family systems, where love is often seen as inherent, unconditional, and safe. Yet the reality many face is a different truth altogether, that the moment they step outside the role assigned to them, whether it be the peacemaker, the obedient child, the silent supporter, or the rescuer, love becomes scarce and validation disappears. You may find that your achievements are only celebrated when they reflect the family's values, your choices only accepted when they benefit someone else, your emotions only tolerated when they are convenient. It teaches you to fragment yourself, to build an identity based on acceptability rather than authenticity. The tragedy is that this fragmentation feels normal, even loving, because it has been practiced for so long that it becomes the only way you know how to belong. You start reading the emotional weather of every room before deciding which version of yourself to bring forward. You become skilled at suppressing discomfort, silencing truth, and shaping yourself into a version that will be rewarded with approval. But this survival strategy is not sustainable because every act of self-betrayal leaves a mark, every smile that hides pain, every nod that conceals dissent, every apology given to keep the peace becomes another layer of armor around your heart, and eventually you begin to lose sight of who you really are beneath the roles and rehearsed responses. Conditional love, when left unchallenged, becomes the blueprint for all future relationships, where you constantly feel the need to earn affection, to prove your value, to suppress your instincts, and to fear abandonment every time you show up as your full self. It creates emotional exhaustion, resentment, and a deep longing to be loved without performance. Real love does not demand perfection. It allows for flaws, for disagreement, for individuality, for growth, and anyone who withholds love as a form of punishment is not nurturing your soul, but controlling your behavior. The courage to walk away from conditional love, even when it comes from family, is the beginning of healing, the start of remembering who you are beyond what others need you to be, and it is in that space of separation, however lonely it may first feel, that the heart finally breathes, the self reemerges, and love, real, whole, untethered love, becomes possible within and around you when cycles of abuse are disguised as family culture or personality traits. They become the most difficult patterns to identify and even harder to break because they are woven into everyday life with phrases like "that's just how we talk," "it's not that serious," or "don't be so dramatic." The normalization of dysfunction is what keeps generations trapped in emotional prisons, where disrespect, fear, and cruelty are repackaged as tradition, humor, or discipline. What begins as a raised voice becomes tolerated as passion. What feels like silent punishment is dismissed as someone needing space. What stings as a cruel joke is brushed off as teasing, and slowly the abnormal becomes familiar, and the familiar becomes acceptable. When you grow up in an environment where volatility is common, emotional neglect is routine, or affection is unpredictable, your nervous system adapts by accepting chaos as connection, and you learn to walk on emotional eggshells, always anticipating mood shifts, always regulating the room before expressing yourself, and in that process, your true voice is buried under layers of survival. Abuse masked as normalcy is especially dangerous because it teaches you not only to mistrust others, but to mistrust your own feelings about others. It makes you doubt whether you're being oversensitive, whether you're the problem, whether the pain you feel is even real, because everyone else around you acts as though nothing is wrong. You begin to internalize this confusion, telling yourself that maybe your boundaries are too rigid, maybe your standards are too high, and maybe love is supposed to hurt a little, and this mindset becomes the breeding ground for more of the same, where you tolerate unhealthy behaviors in friendships, in romantic relationships, in workplaces, because the chaos feels strangely like home. You may even find yourself defending the people who hurt you, explaining away their behavior with their own trauma, their own stress, their own history, and while empathy is important, it should never become the excuse for your continued suffering. Just because someone is hurting does not give them the right to hurt you, and just because a behavior is repeated does not mean it is right. There comes a point where you must step back and examine what you've been calling love, support, or loyalty, because if those things come wrapped in fear, silence, or emotional bruises, they are not love but control, not support but manipulation, not loyalty but bondage. Breaking free from these patterns requires a kind of inner rebellion, a refusal to repeat what was modeled, a decision to draw lines where none existed before, and it often means being the first in your family to say no, to step back, to choose peace over proximity. That decision may be misunderstood, judged, or resented, but it is a necessary act of liberation because your soul was not made to carry the emotional debris of generations. And when you finally stop calling pain normal, you begin to make space for a new legacy where healing, respect, and emotional safety are not luxuries, but the standard from which you refuse to deviate. The path of individuation, of becoming whole, requires courage. It requires standing firm in the face of even the most familiar faces when they bring harm rather than healing. Love does not ask for your silence. Connection does not require your self-erasure, and loyalty should never come at the cost of your peace. To protect your inner light is not an act of rebellion, it is an act of sacred responsibility. When you no longer tolerate what wounds you, you begin to make space for what heals you. Let that be your legacy, not the endurance of pain, but the embodiment of truth, even if it means walking away, even if it means standing alone. That is where the soul becomes free.